a prompt. And then I think we're probably good to go. So on behalf of the BC Brain Wellness Program, I'd like to welcome you to this workshop about hope, rekindling and reimagining meaningful ways of hoping with Lenora LeMay. This is a very complex topic. I have been doing a lot of reading about it over certainly over this past weekend, but for some time now. And I think that that's what sparked my interest to bring this topic to our group, because I do think it's one that would really resonate with care partners and really for all of us who are navigating the inevitable challenges of life. And so I'm really thrilled to have Lenora, and when I approached her, and that she was excited to join us today. She is formerly an elementary teacher and director of education at the Hope Foundation of Alberta. She's an adjunct colleague in the elementary department at the University of Alberta. And as a hope-focused practitioner, she is currently developing hope-focused learning opportunities for kids who are K-12, and also for supporting homelessness. Her research focuses on understanding the experience of making hope visible and accessible in our interactions. And so I am thrilled to turn it over to you, Lenora.
Thank you so much, Elaine. I really feel honored to be with you today. I look forward to the conversation that we're going to have. That's the part that I so look forward to. I want to hear your experiences with hope, about your experiences, and so some of this today, probably more than we even think, will be, oh yeah, no, I knew that, and so there'll be a lot of recognition. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to do. I'm just going to set the stage for how I came to study hope, and then to be able to use it in my personal life, and especially with my father, who is experiencing dementia, and how that continued to teach me things that I needed to know in my life. I'm going to share some of the hope-focused practices and strategies, just the highlights of them. I'm hoping that you will share some that you use as well when we get to the final part, which I'm really excited about, is in engaging that conversation with you. So I just wanted to start with something that really intrigued me when I started to think about hope, and just take a step back. I came to this work and understanding of what I call a narrative conception of hope now, which is about attending to our stories of hoping, which I really believe is an important part of how we continue to move forward. That's pulling the stories from back, the current moment that we're sitting in, which is so important when we're caregiving, care partners for people with brain injuries. But more than anything, it's what transpires that helps us pull in things from our own life, but also to be able to go out and do the things that provide hope for us. So as I'm presenting, I'm going to share some of the learnings that I had along the way. And I tried, when I first started, I was like, what was the first one? Oh, I couldn't do that. So they're not in any order. At first I tried to put them in order, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. And I just want to preface that a lot of the learnings came, like I said, as I worked with other people who were studying hope at the Hope Foundation of Alberta. And one of my mentors, colleagues, and now good friend, Dr. Rana Jevni, really, this first one and many of the other ones, and I'll explain how they kind of unfolded as I go along. She's the one that really tweaked my understanding about hope being a mystery and a science. Before I met Rana, I didn't think I needed to think about hope. I was a teacher in a classroom, and my job was to provide hope to my students, and I understood that to help them reach their goals. So when it started to come up in some of the graduate work that I was doing, I noticed hope and hopelessness. I had become a journaler when I started teaching. I journaled about my experiences. It just happened naturally. I kind of go, my life has been like that. That's how I ended up here. I kind of followed a path, the crumbs that were set out before me somehow. I think we all do. But when I was looking back over my notes, because I was doing some graduate work in teacher education, it was, why do these two terms, hopeful and hopelessness, keep coming up? And when my supervisor suggested that I enroll in a course that was being offered at the University of Alberta called the Hope and the Helping the Relationship, I thought, sure, I'll go. That'll be one course I'll get done in the summer, 3 weeks, tuck it away, and I'll keep working on the project that I wanted to work with. But it was while working with Dr. Rana Jevni that I realized there was so much more to this, and that I needed to pay attention to that. And so I started to work with the program at the Hope Foundation. I took a leave from teaching, and I started to work with the Hope kids, who taught me a tremendous amount. So the Hope Foundation was an applied research center. We also had a lot of scholars. It was internationally recognized. I say was because it's since closed, but still has the more of the theoretical scholarship being pulled together. It doesn't have a house anymore. Hope is hard to sell when you're doing counseling all by itself. So it was a hard fundraising thing to be able to keep it alive at the University of Alberta. It was there for 20 years, which was amazing. We built a strong base, and that's why we can continue to do this work and have these conversations. And I know I will be meeting with Rana to tell her what I learned today, next week, actually. So, here I was, hope, I didn't need hope, and now it's something that I really appreciate thinking about. And I want to thank you, Elaine, and everybody here for giving me the opportunity to go back and do some real reflection over the last 2 and 3 months about what do I want to say. First thing, hope is a mystery. A mystery because it's about our own experiences. And sometimes we can't put our experiences into words, and it's a mystery. We can't say, well, I did this because of this, but it is a mystery because there's so many things coming together, and we want to do, just being curious about it is how we learn about it. So much we don't understand. When Rana Jevni first, back in the early 2000s was thinking about opening the Hope Foundation to study it, it was people, as a psychologist that she was working with, that said, I don't know, I'm dealing with all of these things in my life, these terrible illnesses. And she was at the cancer center here in Edmonton. And they said, but there's one thing that when we talk about hope, I want to get up in the morning. I want to do things. We need to understand this. And that's where the mystery was. It was, what is this? Some of it we may never understand, and that's fine. And it wasn't until 1959 where at an American Psychological Conference where one of the participants stood up and said, we need to start studying hope. And it wasn't until 1980 where nursing researchers started to look at hope, which was beautiful, because they started to see hope as more than goal setting. I say more than, but actually goal setting and, a collection of goal setting and the idea that it's about our faith, perhaps it's about meaning and purpose, it's about our thoughts, it's about our relationships. And nursing researchers in the 1980s started to publish articles about hope being multidimensional and being about our storied experiences and how we pull things from different places in our life, being with different people from the past and looking forward, and what we have to do in the moment, which is so important when we're looking with or we're talking about brain injury, because that's what we're working with. It's in the moment. I remember with my father, it was, what do I need to do in the moment for myself to feel some hope, and for my father? And it wasn't about him getting better. It was about, what do I need to do to make his quality of life what he needs it to be? And that's where hope really helped me. But the research, which I think was, 45 years of dedicated research has brought us to this place here, and I can't imagine where we're going to go. And it's conversations like the ones that you're having that is going to take us to those places. We'll continue to build on that. I pulled this out because it was a piece of research that I just read recently, and it was about how it's about it's reevaluating. And I thought, okay, rekindling, looking at our hopes, seeing positive possibilities. And that's really important, something that Rana taught me. I remember the moment she said it. It's not about the probability of what's going to happen. It's the possibilities that are out there. And especially when we're dealing with adversity, we know hope is about helping us to cope, to get us through those times. But there's so much more to it, and it can make our life much richer when we're paying attention to it. And that's really what I really, that's my message. It's about how we pay attention to it, and how it influences us. But it's about reaching inward, and it's about everything and that meaning and purpose, and our meaning and purpose alongside the people that we're interacting with. When I was a teacher, I would often think that my job was to bring hope to my students, but I didn't think about it the way I think about it now. It's creating hope with other people. It's that with piece. I don't know everything, and I certainly remember learning about this when I would have conversations. I was in the attic of the Hope House, which was the Hope Foundation on the campus, and I would often stop. We had many wonderful conversations. The second floor is where some of the psychological counseling was happening. So we would always talk about our work and see how there were ways to fit things together. And that's how we've learned what we've learned. I've also sat alongside those researchers that came from Australia and other places, and they were doing their projects upstairs in the Hope Kids Suite. So hope is a mystery and a science. It has the science now, it's backing it up. And when I say science, I mean some of the more rigorous research, some of the stuff where, people do surveys and all of that. But I think the nice blending of the science and the mystery of it is this. It's this opportunity. It's taking our experiences, and then maybe if someone is interested, they might look at some research, or some research might come out of that. But the science is there that says that when we are paying attention to our hope, our quality of our life and our well-being is enhanced. And I think that's important. And that's why I do what I do. So that's one learning. The second one was that, and I remember blurting this out. I was sitting one of my very first workshops that when I became the Hope Kids manager, I was asked if I'd like to sit in a session where school counselors were coming and they were learning about working with hope. And we sat in a circle in the living room, where we did most of our workshops. And Wendy, and my colleague, who I learned so much from, Wendy Eady, she asked us to just, what did you come out of this? And it was like, hope is hard work. That was what I said. And it is. It is rewarding, but it can be hard. And it's not, because I remember, for me, okay, this is about me here. This little piece here. Many people would say, oh, hope is Pollyanna-ish thinking. You're just hoping. It's a useless thing. I mean, we've had researchers or philosophers, not researchers, philosophers say it's a useless thing. And I think that's when I came in. I was like, I didn't need it. I had had a life that I was very fortunate. I could figure out things. But I certainly am glad that I've had an opportunity to think about it the way I have, especially when it came time to be alongside my father and to be able to provide what felt for me really important moments for him. So the next learning, and this was something that was really mind-blowing when I started to think about hope in this way. So like I said, a lot of my learning has been the work that I've done alongside people. And I had an opportunity to work with an amazing educator, well, several amazing educators, this one in particular, took it upon herself to create masks with, she was working in a classroom and they were junior high students, and she had them put their, how the world sees them on the outside. And then on the inside, she had them put their hopes that nobody knew about, their inner hopes that they were afraid to tell other people. And so we just took this photograph, and I wanted to talk about masks. This mask, because I think there's some things that maybe even as care partners, what's the mask sometimes, and what are our hopes and fears, taking that, and what are we coping with? Something that you might want to explore in the future. But the reason I put the mask up there, because there's another learning, and this came again from Rana. You must put when you get on an airplane, they tell you to put the air mask on yourself first because you can't be of any service to anyone else. And she would always say, you need to put the hope mask on yourself first. And that's something that you put on for a while, you take off. You put on, you take off. And that's my experience, because when I was reflecting back and with my time with my father, there were moments I was able to step away, had to step away. I had to take care of myself, because if I didn't take care of myself, I wasn't going to be any good to anyone else. And so what did that look like? Well, putting on the hope mask for me when I was alongside my father was coming home in the middle of the afternoon, turning on Netflix and watching Grace and Frankie, because I laughed like crazy. I would finding something that just I could like, oh wow, they live in a really cool, and their stories made me laugh. I needed that. Gardening for me was really important. I took time out to be able to do that. And when I came back, I was refreshed. I really was able to step out of the role in a way, and I might not have been able to have realized what I needed to do had I not been thinking about hope. And my father, then the other piece for me, that a hope mask, the mask that helped me, and I just thought, I hadn't really thought about this until I was prepping for today, was being able to pull back things from things that my father and I had done before he had dementia. And those things then, I could then try to recreate in some ways. So my father he was a very practical man. He was the man I would go to when I was trying to solve something, and he was a very wise man. And so we would just sit sometimes, he and I, before he had dementia, and then I was able to do that with him while he had dementia, just to be able to sit there quietly with him. And that became, over time, one of my hope masks, because I knew it could allow us just to breathe and to be together. And we didn't really have to be doing anything. We could just be together. And I started to look, and I started to look for things that were happening. And, his memory would come in and out like an analog radio when you're trying to find the station. He would come in and out. But when it would come into clarity, sometimes I would cherish that moment and remember it and say, wow, that was inspiring to me, and it helped give me that energy that I needed. And then I remember the day, and it's something that I can look back now on. My father and I baked my very first cake together. And my mother was at a conference, and I wrote about that when I was doing my master's, which was actually, by the way, my hope as an educator. I went back to all those moments and I looked back as an educator. But I remember writing about that. And so my father, and I don't remember thinking this, but my father and I actually sat down one day, and we were baking, and we were having so much fun, and we were laughing, and I was thinking, wow, I was able to pull that forward, and it was in that moment, and then that became my hope mask, and it still is, because I still use those memories. It keeps me going today. In the background of this particular slide, there's a credo that a student had written. And I just wanted to mention that, because in one of the books that I sent for you, there's Dr. Rana Jevani has a credo. And I really, every once in a while, I write, I believe, and things that I believe about hope. And so I know it's difficult. I do know that when we're in the middle of something, it's difficult to journal. But sometimes little bits and pieces every once in a while, and even just putting things that you believe about hope and what you're doing can be reminders for you, and it can be those hope masks. I need to make sure I stay on time so we have time to talk. Another resource that I couldn't send to you because I only have one copy, but it is an amazing resource. Dr. Rana Jevani started out with the Ping twins when she first started her work to think about the work, and it was hoping and coping, because we need hope to cope. That we know. That was something that was clear before 1959, when philosophers and theologians were talking about hope. And they go together, like sometimes they walk alongside of each other. And I think that's why I was so excited to be able to think back over how I've learned to do that, because having them side by side allows us to make sense of both of them. And sometimes, though, as Dr. Rana Judney said, sometimes we have to mope, and it's okay. Moping is part of the strategies. She just did say that we don't want to mope too long, because then other people, so we have to kind of pull ourselves up. And that's where, what I love about Rana's writing is that she's written in short bits and pieces, and you can open the book, this one in particular, and another one that I'll share later, anywhere you want. Or you can look in the table of contents and you can think, today I need this. This is what I need to sustain my hope. And I think that that's where I started to think a little bit when I was preparing today. Hoping is, being optimistic, wishing and dreaming are companions to hope. And they are also sometimes the precursors to our ways of hoping. They kind of can keep us in a place where we're feeling hopeful, but we don't have to feel hopeful all the time. Being able to acknowledge when we're feeling hopeless and finding the supports and the people who can help us think about what that means for us, that's equally as important. And so, that's where it comes out. Like I say to people, this work is hard work. It's not sitting on the couch wishing for something to be different. You have to be engaged. And that's where sometimes it is hard, but it is very rewarding, and it can get us through some really difficult times. So I was in a school setting not too long ago, and they were using chalk, and I went, wow, this is a model of hope. And I've had lots of people tell me that if there was a model, it would be a spiral. And I've done a lot of thinking about that, and I use this in many places in my own work, and I have it on my website, and I have it in my office. It really shows how hope threads through our life. It's in the stories. Hopelessness and hopefulness threads through our stories. They're there, and no matter what point we're on, could be here, it influences our experiences over here. And that's what makes hope, the mystery part of it, really interesting, because our hopes are all unique. Our ways of hoping and hoping is unique to each of us. And whenever I would work with anyone, one of the very first things I would say is that there are no right or wrong answers when you're working with hope. It's what you're experiencing in the moment. And if you're not feeling very hopeful, that's okay too. That's what it's all about. But this spiral really spoke to me, to the wow, and there's all these trajectories in our life and things that we can bring in. And then one last thing before I move to strategies. So when I was at the Hope Foundation, I had an opportunity to sit with people who were in the Teacher Hope Initiative. And the Teacher Hope Initiative was a group of teachers who were on long-term disability. And they met before I came to the Hope Foundation. I really joined the Hope Foundation about halfway into, like, it had been running for 10 years, and then I came on board. And so the teachers came together. They didn't always start off with hope. They talked about individuals who were living with different chronic conditions. And when I met with them, they said, somebody needs to tell our story, because all of the people that were still coming to the Hope Foundation for these weekly and monthly, it was funded by a health provider in Edmonton. They were still meeting, and they were still supporting each other. And they weren't talking about their different conditions. They were using hope in their conversations. And one of the participants, we did write a full story about this. We captured each of their stories, and then we took some of the threads out. So it was kind of that research mystery piece coming together again. We were looking at threads in their stories. But one of the participants shared this is a model she created while she was in the Teacher Hope Initiative. And she said, we need the hope because if we just stay in this part here, we just you know, like it's tough. We need to kind of, and they got, you know, we need to come out of that. And it was in the conversations that they were having. And that's why your support group, I was so happy to hear about it, because it's you guys supporting each other, where you come out and you get, this was just, and you could come here, but sometimes you have to go back in here and spend some time in here. That's okay, because it's a circle and it keeps going. So those are just two different ways of looking at how hope is that mystery, and it is the science, because as we learn and have these conversations, we're learning more about how to support each other. And I looked everywhere for my copy, and then after I put this slide on, I did find my copy of Tuesdays with Maury, and I don't know if anybody has ever read this. It's an older book. But what struck me in this book is something that I learned, one like final learning that I wanted to share with you. And it really, I've heard it over and over, people who were dealing with different adversities say, you know, you have these hopes and you want certain things to happen, but then your hopes change over time, and they do change over time. And when I work with students in classrooms, we often will do some of the strategies that I'm going to share with you in a minute repeatedly, because today it might be this, tomorrow it might be that. And so we want to just keep looking and searching and pulling out our hopes and our ways of hoping. And over time, we become more sophisticated with the hopes that are important to us. And I've always loved this quote by Václav Havel, because I think that this is what makes the kind of work that I love doing with people, is that it's making sense of the moments that don't feel very hopeful. But it's not about sitting and just waiting for, it's not about happiness. It's about having meaning and purpose, our own meaning and purpose. And whether it's when we're alongside of someone, or whether it's something that we are developing as a hope mask, or something that we're interested in. I often wonder what might have happened to me as an educator had I not had this opportunity. I probably would I have become, maybe might something have happened to me, and I might have been one of those people who ended up on long-term disability, because what I heard repeatedly in the stories that the 6 people told me in the Teacher Hope Initiative story was that, you know, I worked really hard. I tried to do everything. I was just so optimistic, and I would say, today is going to be another day. And then one day the sidewalk hit me in the face. And then I had to leave teaching. And so, you know, we do need to take time out and take care of ourselves, because we don't want, you know, our own health is really important. But in the process of doing that, another piece to all of that, and I just want to just share when, and I'm going to hold up, I don't know if everyone can see, but I will hold this up at the end again. It's the Minerva Dialogues, and it's a collection of stories of people with different chronic conditions as well. And when I was rereading the section on individuals living with brain injuries, the one thread for me that's just screeched out, said, I'm the same person. I'm the same person that I was before the brain injury. So when I think about what happened with my father, and I think about, you know, attending to those moments of who he was before he was experiencing dementia, and while he was, being able to hold on to those in my hand were really important as well. So that was just something, and you will have copies of this to read. And I wouldn't say just read the ones on, all of these are amazing stories. And this is where the mystery and the science comes together, is collecting those stories and being able to, I mean, stories come from the heart, they come from our experiences. I can feel them here now. They're so important. And your stories are important, and perhaps your stories will be shared in some way with other people. And it is, I'm imagining they are, when you bring new people on. So, okay, part 2. So one of the very first important really things that I gleaned when I went to the Hope Foundation, I had no idea what I was walking into. I had taken a 3-week course, and in that particular period of time, by September of that year, I had left teaching and I was at the Hope Foundation and I had a title and I didn't have to listen for bells anymore. My life was not regulated. What was I going to do? And so I started reading about the volunteers who had managed a program called Hope Kids, who wanted to bring hope to lonely people. It was a program that started in Edmonton and it blossomed, and they took some of the things that came from the counselors, the psychologists' work, and they implemented them into their conversations. So when they went to continuing care centers, they could have conversations with people there and bring some joy back into their life. And of course they were called Hope Kids because the mother of the youth who wanted to do this knew about the Hope Foundation and had to have hope in it if it was going to be a program of the Hope Foundation. But again, possibilities and where that has gone to and what it's allowed other students in other classrooms to learn about has been amazing. So being, watching for those possibilities are really important. Well, one of the first things that I learned when I was going through the materials was on their first day when they were being trained to be Hope Kids, they took out cameras, Polaroid cameras. And I remember the first day I went out with a group and I was training these youth. That was in, later September, where they had signed up. And one of the youth had taken a photograph, and it was now Polaroid cameras. It cost $1 per picture. And we were a not-for-profit organization, so they were allowed one photo. Because we were just like trying to keep the foundation alive and do all of these things. So this young gentleman came up to me and he said, this is a terrible photo. I know this isn't work. I said, yes, you can take a second. It'll be fine. And then when he came back and they were sharing their photos again in the living room of the Hope Foundation, he held up a photo and he said, this is my second photo. And he said, my finger is in front of the button or the lens rather. And so you can't see the photo properly. But he said, that's just like hope. You just have to keep trying and you just have to keep thinking about it. And I thought, oh, what a beautiful, beautiful lesson. And so photography, I have a photograph. I don't know if you could see me, but there's a photograph behind me in my office. And it's a photograph of a picture that a student took when we were doing Hope Focused Service Learning in a classroom with a group of students, and we were looking at how we could we were looking for a project where we could bring hope into the community, but also these students were learning about their own hope. They took photographs of hope and then they were writing about what they learned about hope. And in every instance, we always started with just draw your hopes, just draw them, put them down on paper. And then we had a bit of an exhibit every year, and this is one. And I just thought this kind of, a lot of people will say one of their symbols of hope is that the sun gets up every day and it's a new day. And that's one of the things that's a really important hope. And then in the center, the heart, the people that, and the relationships that you have are really important. And how beautiful the rainbow is, because it reminds us that better times might come. They might not be, like Tuesdays with Morrie, they might change. They're going to change. Our lives change, that nothing is static. So what does that look like? So the other things that I wanted to share. So Hope Kits. One of the so making a Hope Kit was always really important with Hope Kids. So the first two photographs are two of my Hope Kits. The first one I made when I first went to the Hope Foundation, and inside of the Hope Kit are things, symbols, mementos, things that remind you of hope. So when your hope is damaged, when the hope suckers come around, and I'll talk a little bit more about hope suckers later. When the hope suckers come around, which they inevitably do in all of our lives, you can go to your Hope Kit and you can take something out of there and spend some time with it. I remember having in my Hope Kit a CD of Natalie McMaster, and she was playing the violin, and it inspired me then to think, wow, maybe I want to learn how to fiddle. And so I started taking fiddle lessons, and now my niece and my nephew fiddle way better than me and play the violin because they were inspired. So you never know when something, like I said, the possibilities of what will actually happen. My nephew is now, as an adult, he belongs to a symphony, and it's what he does for fun. It's his sideline, and that might never have happened, right? My next Hope Kit in the center here is circular, because I felt that I had to search long and hard to find something that represented hope to me. And it's round, it's soft, it's something that it's malleable. And inside of that kit is a little, I should have taken a photograph of it. It's a little hopopotamus. So one day we were all having lunch in the little dining room, and one of the clients who had come for counseling walked in, and he had all these little hopopotami, and he gave one to each of us, and he said, "This is for you when your hope isn't as strong as it needs to be." And I still have it. It's one of those, and it's in my current hope kit. The third one, as it reminds me that sometimes I just need to have something soft, and that's all I need. I don't need to be hopeful in the next moment. I just need to know that someone out there cared enough to give us that. And the next one is an Indigenous bag that one of our Cree teachers here made with his students. And of course, there's two bags there, but you can't see them very well. They beaded them, they put hope stories, and then they put things in them which really fit, which I find fascinating. They always had a medicine bag, and that was for life's journey. So you really should have a kit for life's journey. You should have one that you pull out. And in some ways, I always say to people, whether you're working in a classroom, but if you were to make a hope kit for yourself and whomever you were caring for, what would be in that hope kit? Or you could physically make a hope kit with that person. Wouldn't that be, I didn't do that with my father, but in some ways, the stories that I gathered was doing that, but I think that would have been really cool. And the other thing that we did a lot of was music. So if there was music, I've had youth make CDs, or even saying, well, this is a song that I would choose that helps me feel a little bit better. So the first picture here is just about, the supports. Whenever, and this is for you, this might be a conversation that you have with the person that you're caregiving, but whenever I would ask youth what they do when their hope was being challenged, or when the hope suckers came around, they would say, well, I call my auntie. I call my friend. Who are those supports in your life? Having those, they can be in your hope kit, but they could just be in your mind. And I remember one time I felt Wendy eating on my left shoulder when I was dealing with something that was really rough, and it just knowing that she was there. And so I would say that to my friends later, like, just having you on my shoulder is what I need, is just knowing that you're there for me, that support. The second one is a hope journal that you keep. This was a fun one that I made because I didn't want to put a lot of words in it. Just something that I created out of recycled materials. And the last one is a hope DNA. Doesn't look anything like a DNA, but it was a cute, better name than hope molecule. It looks like a hope molecule. But oftentimes, that's the thing, whether I'm working with kindergarten students one day and healthcare professionals the next, we can all make hope DNA. And that's where you can have, you create something with styrofoam, with pipe cleaners, with words on paper. What are the categories of hope that are important for you and ways of hoping? So creating something like that. Hope language. Wow. This is where you don't need anything. You just need something to think about. And now a lot of these phrases, for me, when I first heard some of them when I was at the Hope Foundation, I hadn't been hearing them. Now I hear them more, which I know that we're attending more. I mean, COVID helped us think a little bit about what we needed, hope, because we had no control. So hope language. What's the smallest thing I can do? In this particular moment, what's the smallest thing that I need to do for myself? Like I said, Wendy eating on my shoulder. Oh, what would Wendy do? What would a hopeful person do in this particular situation? You just have somebody alongside with you. Yet versus if, and this is one that I hear now all the time, because now I see it become attuned to it, and it's really making that hope, looking for it, searching for it. It's like the first time when I'm working in a workshop with people over a long period of time, and I say to them, okay, your assignment for tonight is to go out and find on the way home something on the way home that is a symbol of hope. And then they come back the next time, and they're all like, oh, and now everywhere I look, I'm looking for that. And that's how this language of yet and if, I'm always looking for that. It's way, way more important to say yet, because we don't know. And the if, that closes the door. That's a hope sucker for me. I wonder. We, what can we? What can I sometimes too, but you share that with someone else. Sharing our hopes is incredibly powerful. I know that from the conversations that I had with individuals who were in the healthcare, and healthcare managers. Sometimes, we had to think about who we could work with. We weren't in this all alone. And the big one, sometimes a problem that can't be solved now can be solved later. We don't have to solve everything right now. We can just let some stuff slide. Now, just wanted to share something that I sent it this way, and you can create this however you want. This is kind of like a mask. Again, this work came out of research. There was a group of people. No, this Minerva dialogue came out of this. Dr. Jevany, Audrey Stuczynski, and Helen Williamson, who were collecting the stories. And these were the 7 words that came out that were really important for people's hope. It's not in here, but it's something they reflected on later. So there's 7 C's. Now, when I say this to kids, they just look at me like it doesn't mean anything, but 7 C's has a ring to it. So words that were really important to them that started with the letter C. So I'm just going to quickly go through them, each one of them, and just say something that I want to, if you can think about. And sometimes just having something like this, however you want to have it up in your space, it might be something that you create that's maybe you quilt something. I don't, however you have it, just to remind you of what you need to keep that hope mask on yourself, but also so that when you are doing the, as caregiving, you are thinking about that for both of you, so that you have that, like I said, with my father, having that, being able to go out in the community with them, because I knew that was really important. So the community, which people in the community were important? Who in the community were people, where did I need to take him? And some amazing things have happened because of that, because we've opened some doors where people now who have dementia are able to do things where we open the doors, which makes my heart so happy, because people need respite. You need to have some time. And so finding those in a small community where I live of less than 8,000 people, we were able to find some of that. Took time, and it little pieces, but they give me hope. Communicating, that's the hope language, being able to use that. Being creative. Wow. You make yourself a hope kit. That's being creative. Creating a hope kit with someone else is another way of just being creative. We're not artists, but we're all creative in how we, there may be some ways that you can represent your hope. If you are an artist, you might want to put it into art form. But how you're creating those moments, how are you creative and attending to those? For me, it was the garden. I was making a garden. That was how I created. Celebrating moments, really important. Finding ways to celebrate things, keeping celebration in their lives was important. Moments to celebrate. They were different, but of course we know that they're going to be different. But how we celebrate doesn't matter. It can be, we can celebrate by ourselves and give ourselves, whatever we need to do. Making a commitment. That's a tough one. But making a commitment to do this work, it's hard work. Where are the places where you have to make commitments? And I would say when we're caregiving, that commitment to ourselves. Carving out a little bit of time for ourselves, if we can, finding, even if we're with that person and we are with that person, what does that look like? I think we need to talk about that more. Of course, coping is really important. What are your coping mechanisms? And the last one, caring. And this came to this, I didn't put it in my learnings, but the difference between caring for and caring with. And when you're having your, your support groups, that might be a nice one. What does it look like when you're caring with as opposed to for? Because there's that one thing that for me, control is important. And if I was, sometimes my 7Cs are a little bit different, so you can put different words in. But when your life changes suddenly and you've lost control, and then someone is doing things for you, like how that carrying with to me is really, really important. So I say that because I now with a mother who's has other health challenges, and control is really important for her. How am I enabling her to be part of the decision making so that it's what she will enhance her quality of life? It's not about me. I want her to be safe, but I also want her to still have control. Now, it's in a circle for a reason now. It wasn't originally. And it's in a circle on here because grade 5 students looked at this, and they didn't look at it this way. They saw the 7 words going down in a row and they said, but you've missed one. And they said, courage. You have to have courage. So that was that, learned that. And then I was meeting with an Indigenous educator, and she said, she said that makes total sense that they said courage, but courage should be in the middle, because all of these things give you courage. They allow you to have the courage to be who you are. You know what? You don't have to be optimistic and happy all the time. You can be who you are, and people will still be around you. So that notion of courage has stuck with me. And now when I share this and use it in my own personal life, I always think about it in a circle. And one other reason, that being that when I met with teachers to work on another graduate degree, the teachers, there were 2 teachers I talked to about when we did this stuff in their classroom with them. And one of the things that really came through for them was talking about hope, making it visible in their practice with their students, gave them the courage to be who they needed to be. And I was like, okay, for me, that's the courage is there. For you, you might want to change it up. And that's the beauty of this. And finally, here's something that I created last week. I created myself a hope shield. And I wanted this should have been maybe in one of the things that I learned. But when I came to the Hope Foundation, one of the other things that we would do with Hope Kids was to create a shield. And I was not working with Hope Kids one day. I was called out one day by teachers in a community next door to Edmonton. And their students were in a knowledge and employability classroom. So they were students who were struggling a little bit. And they were moving from grade 9 in their school, moving to grade 10. And the teachers were terrified that they wouldn't have the teacher's support, because they worked really closely with these teachers. And so they called me out. And I was like, oh, I work with Hope Kids. They're very hopeful. They bring hope. But I also had been doing some research about homelessness, around how kids who were experiencing homelessness between the ages of 6 to 16 all had hope. So I just put myself to work, and I started to think, okay, I can do this. I can go and have a conversation with them. I have courage. I can do this. So when I got into the classroom, I was standing in the front, and the teachers were sitting in the back waiting for me to impart some knowledge of some sort or do something. And I said, what gives you hope? So I started out that way, and I was met with complete dead silence and for a long time. And I can live with silence for a long time, but this was becoming unbearable. So I thought, okay, you got to change gears here. And I said, okay, what are some things that take away your hope? And there were 2 whiteboards in the classroom at the front, and we filled them completely. Had we had more, I don't know, more whiteboards, we may have put more things up. And it was a moment for us to say, yeah, life has ups and downs. The things, our hope is taken away from us. And so I said, maybe we could make some hope shields. And hope shields are what we put over our heart to, yes, I said over our heart. And one of the kids blurted out and said, hope shields are what we put over our heart when the hope suckers come around. And the notion of hope suckers was born. No one, it hadn't been used yet. So it's one of those things, again, applied research, the mystery of it, having conversations. These kids, and they really nailed it, because those hope suckers were all on the board. And it made total sense to me because we can feel them coming around. Sometimes it's a look we get. Sometimes it's a look we get. It's a raising of an eyebrow. Do you think you can do that? And Wendy Eady always said, as a counselor, as a psychologist, when she was talking to people, she'd say, tell me why. And then she'd hear why and she'd go, yeah, no, I believe you. I believe that we can work on this. So that was another one of those moments where I was able to pull things together. And my husband, when I first decided that I would leave teaching, just to leave for a while, and go to work at the Hope Foundation, he said to me, oh, it's be a cult. And I said, no, it can't, it's not. It's the University of Alberta. They don't have cults at the university. But, you know, and then I'd come home and I would tell him stories of what I was doing. And he had to go in for into a heart clinic later, much later. And one of the nurses said something to him and he turned to her and he said, now you're just being a hope sucker. And he said, the recognition, she was like, oh, okay. And then he said, worked perfectly. So he knew it wasn't a cult, but he had never heard of anybody studying hope and it didn't seem to make any sense. But, you know, the notion that, and it was one of those things that we all know what a hope sucker is immediately. We don't have to see something. We all have our personal version of what actions do that. So it's just something that I wanted to create. Because I had been working on this presentation and I said, what would my hope shield look like now? Because I've been playing with painting. I'm not an artist, but I've been playing downstairs. And so, you know, in the center of that, is a sidewalk with flowers growing out of it, a crack in a sidewalk. And sometimes that's how this work feels for me, but it's also about being able to have the courage to put the things out there, to be able to say, yeah, I know, I think we need to do this and I can do that now. And the small things that keep to, you know, where my family is here. And now with my work with homelessness, it's so nourishing and it's so hopeful. And it's, how do we find the hope in their lives? How do we find the way that they can move forward with meaning and purpose? So I continue to do this work. So for me, I'll just put some resources up here, maybe speak to them before I finish. I just wrote down some resources here. Of course, you will have this where you can look at them. Hoping, Coping, and Moping, like I said, is available on, I didn't send because I didn't have a copy, but it is available on Amazon if you'd like to order it. I sent a couple of copies of the Minerva Dialogues for you to be able to read. I don't have very many of Finding Hope, but it's also available on Amazon if you want to have your own copy. And of course, then it all begins with Hope, Patients, and Caregivers. And that is an amazing resource. I often go to that and read those stories in there. They're so well done. So I just wanted to close by saying thank you for this opportunity to be able to rethink, reflect again. I was very busy in the summer being an interim volunteer manager at the shelter because we were doing a changeover in management. And so doing this presentation really helped me to have the time to get back and thinking with Hope now. And now I have some time again in my life and I'm working on a set of letters called Letters to Pandora. And so I have a lot more to think about. And I know I'm going to have a lot more to think about when we actually hopefully have a little bit of a conversation. But I hope you have had a chance to think about ways that you might rekindle some deeply hidden hopes that you have, or hopes that, you know, that you might want to, I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm always learning. When you think about something small that you might want to do and something that you might want to, that you notice, and you have a support group where you can have conversations and bring it up. But also just being able to reimagine, you know, and I think reimagining is really important. Seeing things as otherwise, as different, is now how you do that. So for me, I'm hoping that today is an opportunity for you to kind of reimagine some things that you have happening in your life as you go forward, pulling things back in that moment. So I want to say thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Elaine.
Well, before we go back to full screen, I just want to and I'll turn off the recording in just a moment, but I did just want to say thank you so much for this information and this perspective on looking at our challenges a little bit differently. Thank you, Lenora. I'm just going to pause the recording.